March 9, 2011. Near 1,000 of us from the community attend a 4.5-hour public session of the Board of Trustees meeting. Just 1 week sooner, I had been invited to this event by my former MJC instructors, on the heels of Modesto Junior College's announcement that they needed to make an $8 million emergency budget cut by the following 2011 fall semester.
This on? My name is Kathleen Ennis, and I'm an alumna and a faculty member. Last week, the president said he came to this college not to tear it apart, but to build it. And I think that statement reveals a truth about the plan before you, that it is not simply an emergency plan devised to guide us through a crisis, but also in a very real way, a blueprint for the direction our president thinks this college ought to be headed. And you know, and I know everyone in this room knows better. We know we are in the midst of a crisis. We know cuts have to be made. We know we have to rethink and retool and re-energize some of our programs to align with a new economic reality. But we have processes in place, processes we've worked long and hard and collegially to develop for this rethinking, retooling, and re-energizing. Analyze the data where it's given, and where the data is not given, ask why it isn't given. And if you find yourself asking, there might be another way to do this, then I urge you to reject this plan and let's get to work. Let's combine our expertise, our experience, our creativity, and our love for MJC.
The debate is not about me in the architecture program. The debate is not about Jeremy Wilson in the engineering department. The debate is about the future of our country, our community, our students, and the education opportunities they deserve.
Please, 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 give the students, give the school an additional 2 weeks to 30 days to come up with their own recommendations, to come up with their own suggestions, because with all these minds and all these people together, all the experts that know how this school works, that attend this school, there has to be another way.
To this point, I've been unable to get any argument that deals with the numbers that have been presented, and answers like we are out of time or the process was flawed, but cuts need to come from somewhere. I just don't find them sufficient, and my students deserve a real answer.
This week, I, along with some colleagues, went to the state capitol to meet with our local Republican legislators. We spoke to them of the importance of the diversity of our programs and meeting the needs of students and industry. And now tonight, I have the surreal experience of urging our own board to listen to the same message. When you cut mass communications, foreign languages, journalism, art, engineering, architecture, communication graphics, industrial technology, culinary arts, and our needed student services, you not only cut the program and the people attached to each program, but that knowledge set, that particular intellectual avenue of discovery is permanently severed from our community.
For too long, community colleges were underappreciated, underfunded, and misunderstood. Working with modest resources, community colleges now educate almost half of all college students.
Nation! They're disrupting my future! I will disrupt their day!
It is a remarkable record. No other system of higher education in the world does so much to provide access and second chance opportunities as our community colleges.
Our president didn't have a very inclusive process. I think that's pretty well documented. He pitched a 24-page document with proposed cuts, gave us roughly 10 days to respond. And as the faculty, senate, and union looked at these cuts, some of them were just so unclear as to why they were made. The numbers were good, they were successful, viable programs. We couldn't figure it out. So then that's when chaos starts brewing, because people are thinking, well, this is personal, this is political, this is a hit job. There's all kinds of conspiracy theories out there.
And Sam was right. Without knowing the personal biases and opinions of the president and the board, we could only guess as to why these programs weren't considered worthy, especially as the president's rationales and numbers started not holding up under scrutiny.
I hope you can see that I'm making an informed decision, not just rubber stamping any administration's proposal.
And the fact is, nobody wants their program cut, and we get that. But as another trustee said, we have received no viable alternatives to this.
One thing that I heard tonight over and over that, again, makes me feel very bad is that people were coming to justify why their program is important. I know that. We all know that everything that is offered at this school has value. All of you are valued.
And despite the board's apologies that it wasn't us, it was them, it was hard. It was hard not to feel like a sacrificial lamb. After all, across-the-board cuts weren't being taken. Specific vocations and programs were being eliminated so that others could survive. The question I most wanted to know was, why weren't these programs and the students and faculty attached to them valuable enough to try and preserve? When we started asking questions, it became very clear right away that despite the board's claims that they had listened to every viewpoint, that for the most part, we were the only ones asking these questions. Did the president or the board ever come to you for advice or to check their facts, or did they ever approach?
And I actually invited him because as this very minute, you guys know more about what's in my facility than any member of the board or the president. Nobody has ever had a conversation. And again, we tried to share some of this information, and the community came, tried to share some of this information at the board, and we weren't even allowed more than a minute to speak. So it's really hard to get a good exchange of information in a public forum like that.
Did you guys have any part in making any of these decisions?
No,
Did they ever
no
ask
faculty
you?
was ever privy to the decisions made by Dr. Loewenstein in terms of program cuts. The deans were not really included in that process, or at least our dean was not included in that process.
In the very beginning of the fall semester, he sent out emails saying he'd like to visit our programs, and he came over to West Campus for lunch. And I brought him over. I invited him over one day, and I invited him to come in and visit the students, much the same way you did. And he wasn't very interested in talking to our students. He didn't come into the lab at all.
It's been kind of tough. We haven't been allowed to talk about the programs. I've given 3 2-minute speeches. This is by far the most I've talked about the whole program outside of just the other people in the program. So 3 2-minute speeches to 2 committees and to the board. 2 minutes to try and explain a program or talk about what's going on, good, bad, or indifferent. That in and of itself says you've been, that it's demeaning, that you've been trivialized, that you can't say a thing. You can't say a thing to defend yourself or your program. I'm not defending myself as much as I would be defending the program and what it means to MJC and Modesto and the professional community around here. And as I said before, what does it mean to America and what we're doing to our students?
I've taught here 15 years and I get 2 minutes to defend my program. There was no other time in which the administration ever sat down and talked with me about any concerns that they might have, either about me or about the program. It never happened.
Those of us who were cut have a theory that the reason that they cut one-person departments was it was easier for the administration to get rid of us. There was less when you are rifting or getting rid of perhaps an English teacher. You can't get away with getting rid of an English teacher without getting rid of all the part-time English teachers that go below the teacher, because they won't allow you to do it. If you've got part-time teachers and you can afford to teach the full-time faculty member, so you're not allowed to do that. So for us, one-person departments who had very few adjunct faculty, it was easy to get rid of us because they didn't have to get rid of a litany of part-time teachers. And although they did that with art, with Hilay's position, it ended up, I think they lost 14 part-time teachers, a lot of sections. I think he wanted to give up art. I don't think he thought highly of art. So for him, it was not a problem. Get rid of those,
It is simply
accepted that in hard times we'll go ahead and we'll cut art and we'll cut the library because they're important, but they're not as important as whatever. You fill in the blank there. And it's very hard when you build a program, and I've been here 10 years now. It's a lot larger than when I got here. We have hired 3 people since. We've hired several that are full-time. We have hired several adjuncts. We've gone from about 8 basic drawing classes to around 11 to 13. It's the 19th most productive class on campus.
In his favor, he was transparent about it. He did publish a document that explained why he was making each cut. Not all presidents would have done that, so that's definitely a mark in his favor. But when you read through the rationales that are provided, they've got some serious problems. Let me give you one example. For one of the cuts that he's proposing to cut our media department, our film department. And when you read through what his rationale is, he explains this as saying that while media is certainly valuable, it can't have any value unless you put your resources in the skills that lead into media. Like you have to have people who can actually run a camera.
3, 2, 1.
Or an actual art background, or knowing how to write before you can get to the level of doing media. So he was proposing to cut media and concentrate on those basic skills instead. Later on in the document, he cuts those basic skills. He actually cuts our art department, and pretty severely, about like 64%. So each rationale by itself makes sense, but it doesn't make sense overall.
I'm mystified by the fact that they've decided to keep a full range of sports, for example. Very disturbing things were reported about his reasoning for keeping sports. One of which was, we need to have all the sports because it attracts more men to the college. All of the women students I know who heard that, their jaws dropped because, the standard answer was, okay, so we're coming to college because we want to be smart and educated, and the guys that we're going to have to be our peers are all going to be a bunch of jocks, who are only here for football. It seemed incredibly sexist to make that prioritization. And especially when, you couple that with the fact that he eliminated the daycare center, which put so many of the women students who are single mothers. Usually it's the young women who end up, if a marriage breaks up, watching the kid. And there was adequate testimony by students who depend upon those childcare services to get their degrees here about how necessary it was. And his attitude was just, sorry, we need to cut somewhere. But that is prejudicial towards women. And that he could do that on the one hand, and on the other hand say, well, we need to have sports in order to keep the gender balance in the school. I mean, I'm sorry, but if the gender balance is skewed in favor of women because more women want to educate themselves, tough luck. That's the way I feel it. If the guys don't want to come, don't let them come. There are enough guys here. So it's 60-40 instead of 50-50. So what?
Yeah, this community, well, this not even this community, this whole valley is in a very hard economic depression. If it's not agriculture, that's about it. And so we have all these industries that, if you want to get the thing rolling, you need job training. And to cut career ed it's ridiculous. You look at compare this valley community to other areas, and maybe what we cut here would have made sense in a more affluent community. If you go to maybe San Francisco, Marin County, it may make sense to cut a lot of the career ed programs there. But in a valley that is struggling and has been struggling ever since I've been here, even in the good times, it was still struggling on unemployment. putting people to jobs or getting people into jobs through job training, CTE programs was where it's at. And to cut those kind of programs is just, it's ludicrous. It's stupid. It's really stupid.
I think it's apparent that he is more academically centered, and that tends to be, I think, the symptomatic of a lot of management now in community colleges, is that they tend to be focused more on basic skills, reading, writing, and arithmetic, remediation of those skills, and less emphasis on vocational education, which is against what our legislature wants. I don't know if you've heard of Assembly Bill 1725. In that, it states that primary mission of California community colleges is to teach vocational and technical education, which defines us. And yet, the campus seems to be more focused on expanding course offerings in other academic subjects. So,
when we're forced to limit our enrollment to 16 or 20 or 24, whatever that number is in the studio, that's a decision that the school has made. We want an architecture program. We want a dental assisting program. We want a culinary arts program. We want a program that is limited in the number of students that we can accommodate in any one section. That was a decision that the school made years ago, that they wanted those programs. And in making that decision, somebody has to make that other decision. They have to analyze, they have to be aware that these small programs, these limited programs, they're small because they're limited in the number of students that can occupy a space. They have to say that, okay, for every one of these, we need a health ed class with 100 students in it. We've got to balance big classes with good FTEs with these smaller FTE programs and reach some balance. Within the SME department, they'd been doing that over the years. The math people took on more than, I won't say more than they could handle, but they were always willing to take on more students in their classrooms than maybe was comfortable. And they were helping to make our program viable because that was all we could do. So our hands were tied. We could only do so much. And then all of a sudden this year, they come along and say, your program's bad because you don't have the numbers. The reason we had the low numbers wasn't our fault, wasn't the program's fault. It was the nature of what we had to work with. And if the school wants to make that philosophical decision that we don't want any small programs, all we want are big lecture hall type programs that generate FTEs so that we can survive, then that's something they have to decide. I don't think they really made that commitment. I don't think that they really cut these programs realizing that there was this symbiotic relationship between one program helping to support another one. They just said, get rid of the little ones. All we have left are bigger lecture hall type classrooms, and that's the school that we want to have.
The president of MJC, Dr. Gaither Loewenstein's ideas were being considered. And we were in the middle of conducting an interview when something very surprising happened.
Joan Smith just sent an email right now saying that she just this morning accepted the resignation of Gaither Loewenstein.
Wow. The president of the college had suddenly resigned.
I'm not sure what to say about that one.
And the reason for his resignation was this man.
Well, I've been following the issue for a few months, and the obvious disclaimer or apparent conflict of interest is that Laura Paul, one of the employees, is my partner, my girlfriend, my romantic partner, and so thus there is an apparent conflict of interest. I became aware of, I had been hearing about this, about the fact that Gaither Loewenstein had a website that had to deal with his music, and I had heard that some people found them misogynistic and sexist or whatever. I searched that, and it took me to a place called Lyricoholic or Lyricsoholic.com. Okay, I'll read you some of the lyrics right here. It says, quote, I'm gonna strap you down, take out my toys and go to town. Spare the rod, spoil the child. ain't gonna spare the rod, ain't gonna spare the rod, spoil my little bitty lover child. That's right, you know you like it. When you feel the leather crack, you know that dad is back. You know you've been trained if you want to minimize your pain. He knows you've been running wild, gotta crack down, bad, bad child. As a man who, at the age 11 years old myself, who was molested, I was outraged. And so, you know, I just said, this has to be exposed. And so I did that. I took these lyrics and I did this of my own volition. No one asked me to. No one encouraged me to. I'm a journalist, and I know that this is newsworthy.
Some letters to the editor have been written to the Modesto Bee since his resignation, saying this never would have been a big deal if people weren't already mad at him for having made these cuts. I think that these lyrics reveal a personality that would have been of concern to us no matter what. No one has accused him of any crimes. But that, together with all the other disturbing lyrics that were misogynistic and don't like fat people and this and that and the Auschwitz comment and all of them together, seemed to portray a mind that was contemptuous of other human beings and self-righteous in his positions. We express ourselves through our art, if you want to call it that. They can't be two people unless this person is schizophrenic. They are the same person. And it almost provided a backdrop or an explanation for how this, this Loewenstein force descended on this campus to make the cuts and did it in a way that tore this campus apart.
And then the day came to cut the tenured staff and the programs that they taught.
I do have a resolution to report out as a result of the closed session. In the matter of reduction or discontinuance of particular kinds of service, whereas pursuant to Education Code 87743, this board adopted based on necessity to reduce or discontinue particular kinds of services. Now therefore be it resolved by the governing board of the Yosemite Community College District that the proposed decision is adopted as a decision of the board.
I still don't understand where they save the money. Where is the savings? Where is the savings?
But some of those program defense bullet points that individuals wrote did identify actual net losses with the reduction in FTSs. If a program goes, those students go with it, we don't get reimbursed. Some of those programs are self-sufficient.
Especially tech ed,
there's tens of thousands of dollars
So the program is
lost.
self-sufficient or it generates extra money. Where are they saving $8 million if that's not the case? That's what, especially with the art, with all that money that they're losing.
We are listening to one side, like just dogma, and there's a whole nother side, and we get 2 minutes.
Did the board members ever, at some point with you, ever explain their process? Like, we got a second opinion. We've spent, we're having study sessions of 6 hours a week with budget analysts to understand all these things. Like, we are double checking what the president's doing and what the district's doing because we are, as trustees, we have to make sure the district's doing their job. And were they ever coming to you and saying, or publicly saying, this is our process by which we are studying the issue? We're spending 5 hours a week with this. We're hiring this consultant here because this is a very serious thing. We want to do it right.
I still think it's a question of values. Nope. Because since the savings are really so negligible, at least in some of the cuts, they've decided that that small amount of money that they might save is just more important than any other value of the program to education or to the community or to their civic duty to provide a trained citizenry, employable population, and so on.
We've had 3 huge meetings dealing with these cuts, staff cuts, faculty cuts, program cuts. and it was unanimous. There was not one voice of dissent that said, actually I have read YFA's documentation, I've read the Senate reports, I've read the ALJ report myself, and here's what I'm interpreting. I just really hoped for at least an independent voice, and we didn't get one. That's very frustrating.
I think it's important that we remember this because the board has got to be held accountable for 100% backing these cuts by this president, who, in my opinion, is a now disgraced, resigned president, who over the course of a year, was not the most well-mannered president. And they've chosen to stand by his judgment exclusively. I think it primarily the understanding that faculty who are fighting for programs are thinking more selfishly than a president who's looking globally. I think there's that sense that if a faculty stands up to fight for his program, he or she's got so much at stake that you can't take them seriously because obviously they're going to try to prove how great their program is. On the other hand, you've got a president who uses success rates to prove that a program needs to be cut. Success rates are extraordinarily dangerous to use. I mean, that sends a powerful message to any instructor that I better give everybody an A or else my program's next, or my department, my class is next. So that's a horrible criteria to use.
And everybody was looking at MJC. The community colleges were looking at MJC and whether or not they would get away with it. They were seeing if they can get away with this. And nobody believed that they could, and they did. They got away with, getting around tenure. The bumping process, all the normal processes of getting rid of your faculty and programs, they got away with it. And that's what's so sad. And everybody in community colleges around the state were looking at that. Will they get away with it? They were talking about it. And they did. They got away with something that was wrong. And shame on them for doing that. And hopefully, when I hear never again, hopefully that's true. But quite frankly, if you get away with it, usually it just gives you an open door to do it again.
When it comes to talking to the faculty are a bunch of intelligent, reasonable people. If we really have an economic exigency, we would all come together and we would all make sacrifices and we would all make decisions that ultimately serve the community and not become a permanent, ill-conceived decision that is going to damage the college. I think he absolutely abused his power. He violated the shared governance, and when he made that decision, of course, when we got the document, everybody knew that his assessment of their own program was wrong. But we didn't know about these other programs because we had not heard their story.
And for all the students who now feel expendable, their crisis is not over. Over the next 6 parts, we'll show you the story you haven't seen, the story you haven't read about, asking the questions that should have been asked, and talking to the people who should have been talked to. On MJC, the crisis begins.